نبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. السلام على الحسين المظلوم المقتول المجروح الأدشان المذبوح من القفا في يوم عاشوراء بلا جرم ولا خطأ. The following is the narration of the Maqtal of Arbaeen and the journey of the family of Rasulullah from Sham to Karbala and from Karbala to Medina. You know, there was a very famous Iraqi poet by the name of Muhammad ibn Malillah, and he wrote some of the most famous lines of poetry about the Masayib of Sayyida Zainab. When he writes this poetry, he speaks from the perspective of Sayyida Zainab addressing the cut head of her brother Imam al-Hussein. And within that he says, وَلِي زَيْنَبٍ نَوْحٌ لِفَقْدِ شَقِيقِهَا وَتَقُولُ يَا ابْنَ الزَّاكِيَاتِ الرُّكَّعِ. That Zainab, she cries and she says, oh, the son of the one who was pure and who would bow before Allah. And then she says, اليوم أصبغ في عزاك ملابسي سودا وأسكب هاطلات الأدمع. She says that upon this day, I have dyed my clothes black in your azah, my brother. And upon this day, my tears, they continue to fall and they don't stop. وَشَبُّوا نَارَهُمْ فِي مَنْزِلِي وَتَنَاهَبُوا مَا فِيهِ حَتَّى مِكْنَئِي وَالْيَوْمَ يَا أَخِي سُوكِ بِقَيْدِي. She says that upon this day, my brother, they came, they burnt all of our tents, and they looted everything which was within that spot where we would stay, to the extent that when they were looting everything, they didn't even leave the hijab upon my head. And oh my brother, they took us as captives, my brother. And she says in the line, اليوم سوقي بقيدي يا أخي والضرب عالمني وأطفالي معي. She says, my brother, my ribbit hurts from when they would whip me, my brother. And at that moment, the children would be watching as they came towards me. Then after that, she continues to speak to the body of Imam al-Hussein. And she says, وَأَنْعِمْ جَوَابًا يَا حُسَيْنَ مَا تَرَى وَالشِّمَرْ بِالْخَنَا صَوْتُ وَعَالَمِي فَضْلُعِي. She says, oh my brother, do you not see that Shimar is bringing his whip as he comes towards me? And do you not see my pain? As Shimar, he strikes me and my rib is hurt at that moment, my brother. And then the poet, he writes, that at that moment the head of Imam al-Hussein replies to Sayyida Zainab, and he says, فَأَجَابَهَا مِنْ فَوْقِ شَاهِقَةِ الْقَنَاةِ. That the head of Imam al-Hussein replies from the top of the spear, and when it replies over there, the Imam, he says that, O Zainab, وَتَكَفَّلِ حَالَ الْيَتَامَ فانظري وقضي الأمر بما جرى. That, O Zainab, everything has already happened, O Zainab. All I want you to do, O Zainab, is to look after the children in the way I would look after the children. But I say, O Imam al-Hussein, upon this day of Arbaeen, that Sayyidah Zainab, when she came to your grave, what sorrow did she have? She said, oh brother, forgive me. You told me to look after your children, but there is one child of yours that I left in that prison in Sham. You know the way Ahl-e-Bait were taken from Sham to Karbala, Karbala to Medina. Imam Sahib al-Zaman, he describes how the women of Ahl-e-Bait were taken in Ziyaratul Nahiya. And in Ziyaratul Nahiya, he says, وَالصُّبِيَ أَهْلُكَ كَالْعَبِيدِ. That, oh my grandfather, your family, they were taken like prisoners. وَصُفِّدُوا فِي الْحَدِيدِ. And they were tied in iron chains. عَلَىٰ أَقْطَابِ الْمَطِيَّاتِ. And they were taken on top of camels. And the sun, they would burn their faces from the sun as the hot sun would be upon them in the desert. And then after that, the Imam, he says, مَغْلُولَةٌ أَيْدِيهِمْ عَلَى الْأَعْنَاقِ. And when they were taken throughout this journey, their arms were tied to their necks. وَيُطَافُ بِهِمْ فِي الْأَسْوَاقِ. And they were paraded through the marketplaces. You know, when Ahl-e-Bait, they were taken from Kufa to Sham. After spending 1 week in Kufa, or 9 days in Kufa, it stated that on the 1st of Safar, they come to the land of Sham. That there were at least 36 different places where Ahl-e-Bait had stopped in that journey from Kufa to Sham. And when they came to Sham, it stated that the first place they went to was a door which at that time was called Bab Thoma. Bab Thoma was named after Thomas, one of the disciples of Jesus. And you find as they went to Bab Thoma, what Shimar he does is that he hangs the head of Imam al-Hussein upon that door. And when he hangs the head of Imam al-Hussein, it stated that Kulthum, she looks at the head of her brother. And when she looks at the head of her brother, she says, Ya Rasulullah, hada ra'su habibik al-Hussein maslubun, Ya Rasulullah. That, O Rasulullah, this is the head of your brother, of your grandson hanging over here, Ya Rasulullah. You know, the moment that Kulthum, she says this, she begins to cry. And when she begins to cry, one narration it says, وَرَفَعَ يَدَهُ بَعْدُ الْحَرَسِ. That one of the soldiers, he raises his hand. And as he raises his hand, وَلَطَمَ لَطْمَةً عَلَى وَجْهِهَا. He takes his hand and he strikes the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib. It stated after that, Kulthum, she looks to Shimar. And she says, oh Shimar, I have one request. That request is, do not take us from this door where people are gathered. Us, the daughters of Rasulullah, aren't used to people watching us in this way. And then on top of that, my request is that do not keep the heads in front of us so the people, they look at us after looking at the heads. But you find that Shimar, he rejects both requests. And you find in this manner, Ahl-e-Bait, they enter into Sham. You know, when they enter into Sham, the bazaar of Sham, that marketplace was decorated. And it was decorated to the point that there was a companion of Rasulullah by the name of Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi. You know, Sa'd ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, it stated that either he was living in Sham at that point where he was going on a journey and he goes through Sham. And when he goes through Sham, he says that, is there a Eid in Sham that I don't know about? They say, "Oh Syed, what do you mean that is there an Eid in Sham?" He replies by saying that this marketplace is decorated, this city is decorated. They say, "O Syed ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, do not be surprised if the heavens they fall upon the earth, or the earth it swallows its inhabitants. For the family of Rasulullah has been brought as captives, O Syed." And over here, one narration it says that Syed ibn Sa'd, he goes to the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, Sakina. And when he goes to the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, she says that, "I was a companion of your great-grandfather. Is there anything I can do for you?" It's stated that the girl, she replies by saying that, "If you were a companion of my grandfather, remove these heads from in front of us." And it's stated that Syed bin Sa'd, he says that, "I gave 400 dinar for the head to be moved." But another narration, it says that Syed ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, he goes to Imam Zainul Abidin, and he says that, "Oh Ali ibn al-Hussein, I was a companion of your grandfather Rasulullah. Is there anything I can do for you?" At that point, Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, "Oh Syed, go and bring a piece of cloth for me." Now what did Syed think? Was that cloth for the heads of the women that were uncovered? But the moment Syed ibn Sa'd, he brings that cloth, Imam Zainul Abidin, he takes that cloth and he places it within that chain upon his neck. And he says, "Oh Syed, from Kufa to Sham, the iron upon this chain has been burning my neck." You know, it's stated that as Ahl-e-Bait were going through the bazaar of Sham, there were people who would throw rocks upon the women of Ahl-e-Bait. And there were people who would spit upon the family of Rasulullah. It's also stated that people, they would pour boiling water upon the family members of Rasulullah. And at one point, an individual, he poured boiling water on the turban of Imam Zainul Abidin. It's stated at that moment, the turban of Imam Zainul Abidin, it catches on fire. You know, in this manner, Ahlul-Bayt, they are paraded through the streets of Sham until that moment it comes when they enter the courtyard of Damascus. They go face to face and they look at Yazid ibn Muawiyah. You know how difficult must it have been for Ahlul-Bayt to face the one who was the killer of their family member. You know, in the time of Rasulullah, after the murder of Hamza, when Wahshi, he comes to Rasulullah, Rasulullah says, "Ghayyib wajhaka anni." He says, "I know you have accepted Islam, but turn your face away from me. I don't want to see you anymore." You know, Rasulullah was the peak of sabr and patience. But whenever Rasulullah looked at Wahshi, he remembered that moment when Hamza, Sayyid al-Shuhada, was killed. Now when you come to Sham, Sayyida Zainab, Imam Zainul Abidin, they're going in front of Yazid. And the first thing which was done when they entered that court of Sham, it stated that that courtroom was full, and they placed the head of Imam al-Hussein in front of Yazid. Yazid at that moment, there are two narrations. The first narration is that Yazid, he looks at the head and he says, "How old have you become, Hussein?" And then after that, one narration it says that he takes a stick and he begins to hit the teeth of Abu Abdullah. But another narration, it says that he took a dagger, and that dagger began to pierce the lips of Abu Abdullah. You know, in Medina one day there was a man who was watching, and as he was watching, he would see that Rasulullah would kiss the chest of Hussein. And then Rasulullah would kiss the neck of Hussein. And then Rasulullah would kiss the forehead of Hussein. And then Rasulullah would kiss the lips of Hussein. That man would say, "Oh Rasulullah, why are you kissing Hussein like this?" Rasulullah, he replies by saying, "Uqabbilu mawadi' as-suyufi war-rimah." Right now I am kissing those spots where the swords and the spears, they will strike Hussein. You know, on the day of Ashura, when Shimar sat on the chest of Hussein, we understood why Rasulullah kissed the chest of Hussein. And when an arrow and a sword went into the neck of Hussein, we understood why Rasulullah kissed the neck of Hussein. And when an individual threw a rock on the forehead of Sayyid al-Shuhada, we understood why Rasulullah kissed the forehead of Hussein. But on the day of Ashura, we didn't understand why did Rasulullah kiss the lips of Hussein. Only in that court in Sham we understood. Because that moment it came when Yazid, he takes that stick and he begins to hit the lips of Abu Abdullah. At that moment, the daughters of Rasulullah are face to face with Yazid. And as Yazid is in that courtyard, one of those individuals looks towards a daughter of Imam al-Hussein. And that individual says that, "Oh Yazid, I want to take this girl as my servant." At that moment, Sayyida Zainab, she stands and she says, "Oh Yazid, have you not disgraced the family of Rasulullah enough?" At that moment, as this dialogue is going on, Yazid says, "Oh man, do you see what you did? You have caused this trouble for me, go away." After that, it's stated that Yazid, as the head of Imam al-Hussein is in front of him, he begins to recite lines of poetry, and he says, "Layta ashyakhi bi badrin shahidu, jaza al-khazraj min waqil asal." He says that if my forefathers from Badr and Hunayn had been here, they would praise me for taking revenge by killing the best from the other side. And then after that, as he looks towards the family of Ahl-e-Bait, he recites an ayat of the Quran. He recites chapter 42, verse 30. In that verse, he says, "Ma asabakum min musibatin bima kasabat aydikum." When he looks at the family members of Rasulullah, he says to them that there is no musibah or trial except that you earn it by your own hands. In other words, he's saying to the family of Rasulullah, all of this musibah is because of your own actions. But at that moment, Imam Zainul Abidin, he replies and he says, "Oh Yazid, this ayat is not about us Ahl-e-Bait, because this ayat is about those who are dhalim and oppressors. This ayat is not about the madloom, but rather that verse which is about us is that verse which says, "Ma asabakum min musibatin fil ard wala fi anfusikum illa fi kitabin min qabli an nabra'aha." That there is no difficulty in the heavens and the earth except for it has been recorded and Allah will bring it out in front of you. Then after that, Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, "Oh Yazid, how long will you keep these chains upon us? Have you not disgraced us enough?" And it's stated for the first time after the day of Ashura, until that time on the first of Safar, you find the chains were removed from the necks of Ahl-e-Bait alayhimus salam. After that dialogue, after Sayyida Zainab, she gives her sermon and she says, "Amin al-adli ibn al-tulaqa," that, "O son of somebody who was freed by my grandfather, Is it fair that your servants and your women are behind a veil? Yet the daughters of Rasulullah are unveiled. Their faces are seen for everyone to look at them. Whether they are noble, whether they are ignoble. You find after the sermon, Imam Zainul Abidin gives a sermon. And as Zainul Abidin is finishing his sermon, Yazid, he recognizes that the situation in Damascus isn't the same anymore. So he says to his mu'addin, the caller of the adhan, to call the adhan. And when he calls the adhan, he says, Allahu Akbar. Imam Zainul Abidin says, none is greater than Allah. Then after that, he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. The moment the mu'addin says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Imam Zainul Abidin says, my flesh and my hair and my meat and my blood, all of them testify there is none who is besides Allah worthy of worship. But then after that moment it comes in the court of Sham, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. The moment this line is taken, Imam Zainul Abidin, he looks at Yazid and he says, oh Yazid, is Muhammad my grandfather or is Muhammad your grandfather? If you say Muhammad is my grandfather, why have you taken his family as captives? And if you say Muhammad is your grandfather, why are you lying? You know, before Ahl-e-Bait were moved to a prison, it stated that Yazid, that night when they came, he placed them in a house which was a ruined, broken down house. And it was seemed as if the walls were about to encave within that house. And the people who would watch that house were two Coptic servants. You know, as the women were within that house, they said, oh Zainul Abidin, it's as if these walls are about to fall upon us. The moment they said this, those two servants of Yazid, they said that it is better for this to happen to you than for that fate when all of you will be slaughtered. Imam Zainul Abidin, he replies in the Coptic language to their surprise, and he says, no, that man will not slaughter us. Then after that, they're moved into the prison in Sham. You know, when they're in that prison in Sham, Syed ibn Tawus, he says, in his famous Maqtal al-Malhuf, that upon the fourth night in that prison, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, Sakina, she saw a dream. And in that dream, she narrated that I saw a lady and I said to that lady, who are you? That lady, she replied by saying that I am your great-grandmother Fatima Zahra. At that point, Sakina, she says, oh mother, where were you when they killed your Hussein? And oh mother, where were you when they took our veils? And oh mother, where were you when we were taken as prisoners from city to city? And it stated in that dream, Fatima Zahra replies to Sakina by giving her the shirt of her father. And she said, oh Sakina, take the shirt of your father. You know, in one of those nights in that prison, it stated that the Sakina, she woke up and she was crying. And as she was crying, the news, it goes to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. With that news, it goes to Yazid. Yazid says, why does this girl cry? They say, oh Yazid, the reason she cries is because she misses her father. So you know what Yazid does at that moment? Yazid, he covers the head of Imam al-Hussein and he says, send her the head of her father. The moment that bowl it came, Sakina, she says, oh man, I am not hungry. She thought that they had brought food, that they had brought water. But the moment she uncovers the bowl, the cut head of her father, the 4-year-old girl, she begins to cry. And she says, oh father, who did this to you? Oh father, what pain did we go through? Oh father, they snatched my earrings. As she's crying, it stated a point had come comes. When her voice it becomes more faint, she falls on the ground. Imam Zainul Abidin says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You know, when they were burying this girl, before that they gave the ghusl and they put kafan upon the body. It stated that one of the women of Sham was assigned to help Ahl-e-Bait. That lady, when she looks at the body of this 4-year-old girl, she says to Sayyida Zainab, Oh Zainab, did this girl have a disease? Sayyida Zainab says, why do you ask this? She says it's because her body is covered in marks that are blue. Sayyida Zainab says, no, these are those marks when the army of Yazid would strike this girl for remembering her father. It's stated in that prison they bury the daughter of Imam al-Hussein. After that, a day it comes where Yazid decides that he'll free Ahl-e-Bait. Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, Oh Yazid, give us somebody who will take us through the route. Yazid, he gives Al-Bashir ibn al-Hadrami. And then he says after that, all of those tabarrukat and items which you took, I want you to return those items. It's stated that a blood-covered shirt, it comes back. That blood-covered shirt which Imam al-Hussein had on the day of Ashura. It stated one ring, it comes back from when that man cut the finger of Hussein and took the ring. It stated that 2 earrings, they come back, and all of the women, they give their fursa to Rabab. After that, it stated that a flag, it comes back, and all of the women, they remember about Fadl Abbas. But then that moment it comes when the heads are returned to Ahl-e-Bait, that each of the women, they would take the heads. That Layla would take the head of Ali Akbar, and Farma would take the head of Qasim. But as all of the heads were coming one by one, that moment it comes when the head of Imam al-Hussein is brought. When the head of Imam al-Hussein is brought at that moment, all of the women, they began to say, Wa Ghariba, Wa Madluma, Wa Husseina. One by one, they begin to cry, they begin to hold that head. You know, after that, it's stated they begin to go towards Medina. You know, as they were going to Medina, there was one lady for whom it was especially difficult to leave Sham. You know who that lady was? That lady was a Rabab. You know, you would think that a Rabab would be comforted going to the grave of her husband and her child for the first time. But at the same time, a Rabab is also leaving a child in Sham. As this caravan, it begins to go towards Medina, a point it comes where one route goes to Karbala and another route it goes to Medina. Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, Oh my Aunt Zainab, which way should we go? Sayyida Zainab says, Oh Sajjad, take us to Karbala. You know, as this caravan begins to move towards Karbala, it's stated that Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari was already in Karbala. And it's stated that Jabir, he went to the grave of Imam al-Hussein. And as he went to the grave of Imam al-Hussein, 3 times he says, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. And then he says those famous lines, Habibullah yujibu habiba. That, oh Hussein, what type of lover doesn't reply to the one who loves them? You find that Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, he stands by the grave of Imam al-Hussein, and he says, As-salamu ala khamis ashab al-kisa. That salam be upon the final member of the people of the cloak. Salam be upon the grandson of Rasulullah. And in this manner he recites these lines of ziyarah. But as Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari is by the grave of Imam al-Hussein, from the direction of Sham, a caravan, it begins to move in the direction of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. Jabir, he says to his companion Atiyah al-Jofi that, oh Atiyah, go and look at that caravan. Atiyah says, oh Jabir, it is primarily a caravan of women, oh Jabir. Jabir says, oh Atiyah, is there a man within that caravan? Atiyah says, oh Jabir, there is one old man. He walks as if there is a lot of pain within him. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, he goes to Imam Zainul Abidin. Imam Zainul Abidin says, oh Jabir, I am Ali ibn al-Hussein. Jabir says that you are Ali ibn al-Hussein. Atiyah had told me there is an old man in this caravan. Ali ibn al-Hussein is a young individual. You find the Imam says, oh Jabir, Asham, 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 oh Jabir. Then after that, the Imam, he says his famous lines to Jabir ibn Abdullah. He says, oh Jabir, ha huna qutilat rijaluna. That, oh Jabir, this is that spot where our men were killed, oh Jabir. Ha huna dhubiyat atfaluna. And oh Jabir, this is that spot where our children were slaughtered, oh Jabir. Ha huna subiyat nisa'una. Oh Jabir, this is that place where our women were taken as captives. And then he says that line, Ya Jabir, Ha huna sakata Abu Abdullah. That, oh Jabir, this is that spot where Hussein fell to the plains of Karbala. Imam Zainul Abidin at that moment, he begins to walk to the body of his father. And as he's walking to the grave of Imam al-Hussein, in his hand is a severed head that he's taking to the grave of Hussein. He takes that head and he begins to uncover the body of Imam al-Hussein. And he places that head alongside the body. But in one narration it stated that one of the mu'jizat that occurs at that moment is that the head of Imam al-Hussein began to say tifli, tifli, that where is the infant, where is the infant? It stated that Imam Zainul Abidin, he takes the body of Ali Asghar. He places the body of Ali Asghar on the chest of Imam al-Hussein. After that, each of the women, they would come to the grave of Imam al-Hussein. Then Layla would come, and Farwa would come, and Kulthum would come. But you know what Sayyida Zainab, she does? Sayyida Zainab, the first thing she does is that she goes to the grave of Abu Fadl Abbas. And she says, oh Abbas, where were you when we were taken as captives of Abbas? And oh Abbas, where were you when they took my veil, oh Abbas? After she goes to the gravesite of Abu Fadl Abbas, that moment it comes when Sayyida Zainab, she comes to the grave of her brother Imam al-Hussein. You know, on the day of Ashura, in the final moments of Imam al-Hussein, When Imam al-Hussein was surrounded from all sides and his body was covered in wounds, Sayyida Zainab had come outside of the tent and she had said, A'anta akhi, that are you my brother Hussein? You know, Ayatollah Jawadi Amali once said in a lecture that don't be surprised that if on the day of Arbaeen a voice comes from the grave of Imam al-Hussein and that voice it says, A'anta ukhti, that are you my sister? That how much must the face of Sayyida Zainab have changed after the event of Karbala. Sayyida Zainab, she falls at the grave of her brother. And when she falls at the grave of her brother, she says, oh my brother, forgive Zainab. I say, oh Zainab, you carried the message of your brother. You are the last person to ask for forgiveness. At that moment, Sayyida Zainab, she says, oh my brother, you gave me an amana. I left that amana in the prison of Sham. As they were in the land of Karbala, one of those women who were especially heartbroken was the wife of Imam al-Hussein al-Rabah. You know, some narrations, such as in the work Tariq al-Dimashq, it stated that Rabab didn't leave the land of Karbala. That Rabab, for 1 year, she stays in the land of Karbala. And another narration says, no, Imam Zainul Abidin takes her to Medina. If you want to understand how great the tragedy of Karbala is, Rabab didn't live more than 1 year after Karbala. Then it stated that Rabab, she said that as long as I am alive, I will never go under the shadows. That as long as the Rabab is there, she will be underneath the sun. And a Rabab will never drink cold water. In 1 year, Rabab passes away. In 1 year, Sayyida Zainab passes away. In a few years, Layla passes away. Then what did Karbala do to the women of Ahl-e-Bait? But you find after that, one final great musibah was the return to the land of Medina. When Ahl-e-Bait, they returned to the land of Medina, Kulthum, she recited some famous lines of poetry. And within those lines of poetry, she says, Ya Medina tajaddina la taqbalina. That, oh Medina of our grandfather, don't accept us, don't take us. Because when we left you, Hussein was with us. And when we left you, our children were with us. And when we left you, Abbas was with us. But now when we have returned empty-handed. You know, when the caravan of Ahl-e-Bait returns to Medina, they don't enter the city of Medina immediately. They stop in the outskirts of Medina. And when they stop in the outskirts of Medina, Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, Bashir to Bashir al-Hadrami, that, oh Bashir, your father used to recite poetry. Do you also recite poetry? Bashir says, yes, I am also a sha'ir. Then the Imam says, oh Bashir, go and tell the people about what has happened to Hussein. Bashir, he goes into the land of Medina and he says those lines of poetry, Ala ya ahla yatrib la muqama lakum biha. فقتل الحسين وعدمه مدرار وجسمه بكربلاء مدرج ورأسه على القناة يدار. He says, oh people of Yathrib, this place isn't worth living anymore. For Hussein has been killed and the tears they fall for Hussein. The body of Hussein is in Karbala covered in blood. And the head of Hussein was put on a spear and taken through the lands. You know, when this call was made, it stated that a daughter of Imam al-Hussein by the name of Fatima al-Sughra, she comes and meets the family of Ahl-e-Bait. And when she meets the family of Ahl-e-Bait, she goes towards her aunt Zainab.